The following podcast contains bizarre theories, strange facts, and some out-of-this-world opinions. Listener discretion is advised, especially if you trust the government. It all started with a knock in the night. A knock that intensified through a quiet little council house in North London, England. The furniture started moving, beds started shaking, and then came the voice of a man, speaking through an 11-year-old girl. The Hodgson family lived at 284 Green Street, and they could not explain what was happening to them. Reporters called it a hoax, investigators said it changed everything they knew about the paranormal, and the police? Well, they officially reported seeing a chair lift off the floor. This isn't folklore or a rumour, this is Enfield, the most documented haunting in British history, and tonight, we're pulling it apart. Welcome to Conspirashy.
Conspiracy.
Hello and welcome back to Conspirashy. I'm Ash, and every single Wednesday we dig into one of the world's strangest mysteries, missing people, cover-ups, and theories that sound way too wild to be true, but just might be. And if you're new here, welcome to the club. Grab a coffee or a pint or whatever gets you through the weird, because this is where curiosity meets chaos. Now, quick disclaimer before the madness begins. This is a comedy and entertainment podcast. It's all for entertainment purposes only. So relax, have a laugh, and let's not summon anything we can't send back, yeah? Moving forward, by the way, I've looked at the stats, I've read your comments, I've checked out your DMs, and it seems that you guys absolutely love the mini files format. So, I'm making it official. From now on, you'll be getting weekly mini files episodes in that format, short, snappy, to the point, presenting the conspiracy and having a bit of a laugh with it. But I'll also be releasing one bonus episode every month featuring Headline of the Month, Tinfoil Confessions, and the Wacky Wheel of Weird for anyone who might miss those chaotic segments. And I do really enjoy doing them, so I definitely will be giving you a monthly dose of those. But in today's episode, we're going deep. This is one I've wanted to cover properly for ages. The story that turned a quiet North London street into ground zero for the most documented haunting in British history. We're talking about the Enfield Poltergeist today, guys. And since this is our Halloween special part 2, we're going to do it properly. So lights down, volume up, because this isn't just your average bump in the night story. This is sworn police testimony, audio tapes that'll make your skin crawl, and investigators who practically lived inside a haunted council house for nearly 2 years. But before we dive in, do me a massive favour, hit that follow or subscribe button wherever you're listening. It genuinely helps keep this little corner of curiosity alive, and lets me keep making the weird stuff you lot clearly can't get enough of. Alright then, the house was ordinary, the family normal, the haunting anything but. Let's dive in. Right, let's set the scene properly because this bit's crucial. We're not talking about some creaky gothic mansion with a thunderstorm outside and a dramatic chandelier swinging in slow motion. Nope. This is Enfield, North London, 1977. A council-owned, semi-detached house at 284 Green Street. Brick walls, beige wallpaper, and a washing machine that probably rattled louder than the ghost itself. This house was your ordinary council house, a boring council house, a safe council house, and maybe that's what makes this so terrifying, because the supernatural isn't supposed to show up where the telly license reminder sits on the fridge. The family, the Hodgsons. Right, let's take a look at the Hodgsons. So, Peggy Hodgson was a single mom in her early 40s, proper working class woman, tough, tired, and doing her best. She'd recently separated from her husband. He legged it and started a new life elsewhere. Maybe you knew what was about to come in that house. But he left her to raise 4 kids alone. What a gentleman. The kids, you had Margaret, who was the eldest at 13, Janet, the middle child, at 11, Johnny, who is 10, and Billy, 7. It was a full house. Already chaotic enough without ghosts throwing tantrums, let me tell you. And that's exactly where the haunting began, right? It began small. Simple knocks, little taps on the wall. At first, Peggy thought it was one of the kids messing about, right? Or that maybe one of the neighbours was putting up shelves again, because that is classic British anyway. No ghosts in here, just Jeff next door with his bloody DIY again. And honestly, the Enfield Poltergeist's biggest fear wasn't a priest, it was a noise complaint from the council, let me tell you. So the knocking actually started in early August around bedtime. Usually it would take place just after 9 PM when the house went quiet. And here's the creepy bit. The knocks would respond. Yeah, if Peggy banged on the wall, the knocks would bang back. 1 for yes, 2 for no, as if something unseen was listening. Then it escalated. The kids' beds began to shake, sometimes once at night, sometimes multiple times, violent tremors that jolted them awake. Janet, one of the daughters, said it felt like the mattress was alive, pushing under her as if trying to throw her off. Then, one night, the furniture decided it's had enough of staying put as well. Peggy watched as a heavy chest of drawers lifted off the floor and slid across the room towards the doorway, almost as if something invisible was blocking her escape. She tried to push it back, but it felt like someone or something was pushing against her from the other side. And at that point, she did what any terrified but still very British person would do. She called the police. Now, let's be honest. What exactly are the police going to do about a ghost? Are they going to arrest it? Like, you're nicked, mate. Anything you haunt can and will be used against you in a court of law. They can barely keep track of criminals being released by mistake. Wink, wink. Let alone an invisible one chucking furniture about. You know they'd show up. And the ghost's first question is, do I get a solicitor or do I have to wait for the Catholic Church to show up? But, to their credit, 2 officers showed up. WPC Caroline Heaps and PC John Burkis Randall. And they were just your average coppers on the beat, right? They were expecting maybe a domestic dispute. Definitely wasn't expecting The Exorcist playing out in Enfield. But when they arrived, Peggy led them upstairs and they stood in the bedroom waiting to see what happened and trying to understand why the family was so scared. And then, right before their eyes, a wooden chair lifted clean off the floor and moved several feet across the room. Now freeze that moment in your head, right? Because that's not hearsay. That's not, oh, my auntie's mate swore it happened. That's documented. Real life documented by police that they saw a wooden chair lift clean off the floor and move several feet across the room. Yeah. After the incident, the police returned to the station. WPC Heaps wrote an official report, and her exact words, and these are verifiable, were, "It moved about 7 feet across the floor. I checked to see if it could have slid along the floor, but it didn't appear to. It lifted clear." End quote. That's a sworn Metropolitan Police statement. A legal record confirming that a police officer witnessed a household object defy gravity, which is mad. That report should have, made sure there was no debate about whether this was real or not. They should have phoned up the Queen herself and said, "Ma'am, reality has malfunctioned. Chairs are flying now. What do we do with that?" But instead, the statement was quietly filed away and the media circus moved on, because that single sheet of paper, that cold, factual document, was too dangerous. And you can mock mediums, you can dismiss eyewitnesses, but you can't just wave off a police affidavit. And that's why the Enfield case remains one of the most documented, most controversial, and most spine-chilling hauntings in British history. But the madness, it wasn't over. Not even close. Because what started as knocking and flying furniture was about to find its voice. Late 1977, the house at 284 Green Street has gone from mildly creepy to full-blown chaos. Furniture's flying, police have witnessed the impossible, and the Hodgson family, 4 kids and 1 worn-out mum, are living every parent's worst nightmare. And yet, somehow, things were about to get even stranger. Because this wasn't just a haunting, it was about to become a possession. So, Janet, the 11-year-old daughter, was at the centre of it all. Small, weary, cheeky grin, the kind of kid who'd probably get told off for giggling in class. But soon, that laughter turned to screams. The family said it began with nighttime convulsions. Janet would twist and thrash in bed, her body shaking violently, eyes rolled back, sometimes even levitating off the mattress, guys. It wasn't every night, but it happened often enough to terrify everyone. At first, Peggy thought it might be a medical problem, because I don't know how you'd explain levitating, but anyway, she called in a local GP, general practitioner, a man who probably expected a standing case of the childhood hysteria, not a full-scale paranormal episode, let me tell you. So he examined Janet, took her pulse, checked her pupils, even ordered a few tests, and found nothing physically wrong with her. She had a healthy heart, normal vitals, and no neurological issues at all. Just these unexplained fits. And the unexplained was about to get weirder, because shortly after that doctor's visit, that's when the voice started. The first time it happened, the room went cold, and I mean properly cold. The kind of chill that makes your breath visible and your skin tighten. We all know that feeling when your skin goes all crispy, and I don't know how to explain it, but you know the feeling, right? When you feel absolutely frozen to your core. Well, we definitely know how it feels in the UK, let me tell you. But anyway, yeah, the room went cold, and Janet suddenly sat bolt upright in bed and began to growl. Her mother said it sounded like a man's voice coming from the back of her throat. It was deep, rough, guttural, like she'd swallowed sandpaper and a pack of cigarettes. And honestly, that voice probably sounds like every single guy over 40 on a dating app. But if you've ever seen The Exorcist, you'll know that demonic voice Regan uses. That's probably about as close as you can get to explaining it and describing it. It's supposed to sound like that, kind of like... to be honest, I would do an impression, but I only know the scary movie version, which is like, "You man." Yeah, okay, I'm gonna do it. The priest goes, "Yeah, my mother." And the Exorcist girl goes, "Your mother sucks cocks in hell." And then they do the tongue thing. Oh my days! Oh, and the start where they're all around the piano. But by the way, I'm so excited. We're getting a Scary Movie 6 next year. Can't wait. Bring back comedy. What was I talking about? Yeah, the Exorcist girl. Yeah, so that voice that "your mother sucks cocks in hell," that's as close as I can explain how it sounds. But apart from that, this wasn't a Hollywood sound effect. This was an 11-year-old girl from Enfield speaking like a 70-year-old man. And the voice had a personality to it too. It laughed, it swore, it cursed, it argued with investigators. At one point, it even mocked Janet's mom. So, they had to get to the bottom of who was speaking through Janet. And when they asked who it was, the voice actually rasped out a name and it said, "My name is Bill." And when pressed further, it said, "I lived here before. I died in that chair downstairs." That's really important. Remember that. I lived here before. I died in that chair downstairs. Remember that. Now, when you first hear that was coming out of Janet, it does sound like pure theatre. Like, kids can make things up, right? That's what kids do. They make things up, they put on shows, and they perform. So, absolutely, first thing that came to my mind when I was reading about this was kind of like, yeah, but anyone can be like, "Oh yeah, my name's Bill and I died downstairs," and like, you know what I mean? So there is a bit of skepticism there, but the details that came out of Bill's mouth were oddly specific, because he also came out with, through Janet, that he'd gone blind before dying of a brain hemorrhage right there in the living room chair. I'm a poet and I didn't know it. And a few months later, that specific statement took a chilling turn. And let me tell you, this is crazy. This is absolutely mental what I'm about to tell you. And I don't know how this is possible, but let's take a look. Because a man named Terry Wilkins heard about the case in the papers. Heard about the Enfield case in the papers, right? There was a media circus. It gained a lot of traction. Everyone was hearing about it. So this guy, Terry Wilkins, he comes forward saying, hang on a bit. This sounds exactly like his father, Bill Wilkins, who had indeed lived and died at 284 Green Street, where this family lives now. Terry confirmed his dad had suffered a brain hemorrhage and died in a chair in that house decades earlier. Bill was a builder, an ordinary London bloke, late 50s, partial eyesight loss near the end. And he wasn't buried in the house or anything like that, but this overlap is uncanny. How did Janet, an 11-year-old girl, know those details? There's no record of Bill's death publicly accessible. No one in the Hodgson family had ever met the Wilkinses. So how did Janet know to say, my name is Bill, I died of a brain hemorrhage, I went blind, and I died in the chair downstairs? It cannot be a coincidence. That is suspiciously convenient. How do you explain that, guys? Does anyone have any idea how to bloody explain that? Because I've been racking my brains and I cannot get to the bottom of that. Even if you make shit up as a kid and you're performing and whatnot, how do you find that information out? But with all of this now happening, with all of these strange coincidences, speaking in tongues, speaking through a man through the voice of Janet, furniture flying, all sorts happening, there had to be an investigation. So the investigators came in and they started recording everything. Knocks, whispers, the strange temperature drops, and of course, the voice. And yeah, those recordings are real, and you can actually find them online today if you're brave enough. They're grainy old tapes full of eerie rattles, bangs, and that unmistakable voice of Bill. It's not constant, it fades in and out, but when it does speak, you'll get goosebumps, let me tell you. One session also has Bill saying, "In heaven, but I'm not a very good talker." Investigators from the Society of Psychical Research, the SPR, were stunned. Two of their members, Maurice Gross and Guy Leon Playfair, spent months practically living in the house. They logged over 2,000 incidents. 2,000! Doors slamming, furniture flying, toys hurtling themselves at walls, puddles forming out of nowhere, fires starting spontaneously, and always the voice. And I'm just imagining the paperwork, incident number 1874, teaspoon gently rotated 45 degrees. Must cite, that's a full-time job for a demon. What? 2,000 separate incidents of things happening in one house. And it's recorded. Mad. They even tested Janet to see if she was faking it, obviously. During one session, she was told to put water in her mouth while the microphone was set across the room, so she did. And while her mouth was full, the voice still came out. Gravelly, harsh, unmistakably male. Now, imagine sitting in that little living room in Enfield, the ticking of the clock, the smell of the tea gone cold, and from the corner, a small girl is speaking with the voice of a dead man. You'd find me halfway to Milton Keynes before that session ended. Get me out of there. Send this girl to the Vatican. I don't know. Just do something, but this ain't normal. And I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. You'd think at this point, the family would, alright, let's pack up. Let's get out of here. Yeah, send her off to the Vatican. That's all, yeah. Nice knowing you, Janet. See ya. Come back to us when you're cured. Yeah, you'd think they'd just bolt, right? Get out of there. Nothing to do with that house anymore. But they actually didn't. And here's one of the strangest parts about it, because they actually tried to move out. To be fair to them, they tried. Peggy actually begged to the local council to rehouse them. Like, we're in danger in this house. Please just move us from this house to another house, and, maybe the new family who comes in can deal with it. I don't know. But, we need to get out of this house. But it was the late 70s. There was a really bad housing crisis in the UK. And so the council basically said, we can't move you unless you're in physical danger. Verifiable physical danger. And it's physical danger? The ghost's throwing furniture at us. I'm levitating off the bed and speaking in demon tongues. That is how you know that the Enfield Poltergeist was actually truly British. Because it's not the haunting that kept them there. It was the queue for social housing. They had no choice. They had to stay because there was no way the council was rehousing them. Crazy. But beyond the bureaucracy, there was something else. The family had nowhere else to go. They had relatives nearby, but none with enough room for 5 people. Remember, there's 5 of them. There's the mom and there's 4 kids. And honestly, does anyone really want to be burdened with that? Sorry, love, but one of your kids is possessed by a demon. I'm not sure I want to house you. Yeah, we do have a spare bedroom, but we're good, actually. So, they stayed in the same house with the same knocks and voices every night. So, what happened? Why did the investigators not do anything? What was the deal? Well, actually, the investigators were divided about what was going on in the Enfield house, because while Gross and Playfair were convinced the haunting was genuine, other SPR members weren't so sure. Anita Gregory and John Beloff, 2 fellow researchers, suggested the girls were just playing tricks, using ventriloquism, bouncing on beds, or even bending metals with hidden props. Gregory described the case as overactive imagination with occasional exaggeration. Literal quote. And, to be fair, even when the girls were caught trying to fake something, like throwing a pillow or throwing their bed sheets, because, again, they are still kids, right? They still want to play and they're still mischievous, and they actually were caught trying to fake some other stuff. But the unexplained stuff didn't stop just because they were caught on the stuff that could be explained. Objects continued to fly when no one was in the room, voices were recorded when Janet was asleep, and the temperature kept dropping significantly. There were documented cold spots where the temperature fell by over 10 degrees within seconds. And to be fair, it is Britain. It's always fucking freezing. You could have the devil himself standing next to the radiator and you'd still be like, yeah, typical London weather. And something else that goes with that is the photos, right? There are some pretty famous photos that come from this. The black and white grainy shots showing Janet seemingly suspended midair, limbs flailing, mouth open. Yeah, go check them out. It kind of looks like levitation, but also could kind of look like every single highly dramatic I'm feeling things photo shoot from 2007. Shout out if you're old enough to know what that is. But yeah, the images were taken by press photographer Graham Morris, who was invited to the house to document the phenomena. He claimed the pictures were snapped during one of Janet's fits, and he swore he didn't use wires, props, or special effects at all. Now, skeptics argue that she's clearly just jumping from the bed, and yeah, on first glance it does look like a jump, but if you look closer, her expression that's on her face, it's not playful, it's terrified. She's displaying expressions that she's absolutely terrified, to be fair. And the way that her body's angled, it's not your typical leap. It does look like she's being yanked, upwards. rather than like jumping forwards. It looks like she's being actually forcefully pulled upwards. So obviously, maybe there could have been a bit of trickery, some clever photography skills used, for sure. But you've also got the fact that there's other photos capturing objects flying through the air. So they've got pictures of Lego bricks, marbles, toys. In one instance, a Lego brick reportedly struck photographer Graham Morris right above the eye and drew blood from him. And imagine explaining that at the hospital. Yeah, got glassed by Lego. A demon's one thing, but getting an emergency room invoice for a plastic construction toy, just next level disrespect. And for nearly 2 years, the house stays active. There were bangs, voices, fires, levitating objects, even apparitions. Shadowy figures seen standing in doorways or at the top of the stairs. And it wasn't just in the house as well. Neighbours started hearing it too. One even claimed to see a curtain twist itself into a tightrope shape while no one was near it. Electrical equipment malfunctioned constantly. Radios changed stations on their own. Doors would open slowly. That kind of slow that's worse than fast. You know what I'm talking about? That. You know, you could hear the hinges whining like they're trying to warn you about something. Just. And you just know someone or something's, creeping around the corner ready to, hit you with a jump scare. Yeah. Sorry, might have terrified you a little bit there. Anyway, every so often, the voice would come through as well over the next 2 years. Sometimes it was angry, sometimes mocking, and sometimes it would whisper kind of taunting things. That was caught on voice recording. Things like, "They don't believe us, do they?" Like really taunting, being like, "I'm here, I'm causing all of this, I'm speaking through Janet, and no one is believing me, and so I'm just going to taunt you with it." And honestly, if that doesn't make your skin crawl, I don't know what will. So what had to happen next? 2 years of this madness. No one could explain it. The investigators were losing their minds. The police were seeing shit. Photographers were getting bloody. So what happened? Well, here's a twist that'll sound very familiar to horror fans, and also to those who listened to last week's episode, because in 1978, Ed and Lorraine Warren, the famous American paranormal investigators behind the Conjuring films, turned up at 284 Green Street. Yeah, let's see if they get kicked out of this one and all. There's a reference to last week. Definitely go and check that episode out if you haven't already. It's also another Halloween special. Well, the Warrens, they'd heard about the case and wanted to see it for themselves. So although the Warrens were only there for a brief few days and they weren't officially part of the SPR investigations, they did claim that the house was overrun by demonic forces. Lorraine described the Enfield case as one of the most compelling examples of supernatural activity she'd ever witnessed. Skeptics, of course, accused the Warrens of swooping in for fame, which, to be fair, they kind of did. Hollywood picked up their version decades later for The Conjuring 2, and the rest is blockbuster history. The Warrens heard Poltergeist and immediately started calling Hollywood saying, "We got the sequel to the Amityville Horror, just need a tax write-off and some travel expenses." But the real-life Hodgsons, the actual people this happened to, they didn't get no fame, they just got trauma. So, the Warrens came, the Warrens left, they actually did nothing. They didn't do anything, they just said, demonic forces, it's real, one of the most documented and realist examples of the supernatural, and they left. Thanks, Warrens. Yeah, go make your money in a decade. So, what does happen? After all this chaos at 284 Green Street, the knocks, the voices, the furniture, did it all just randomly stop one day? Or did the haunting fade into something quieter? Well, this is where the line between the legend and the lived reality starts to blur. By late 1978 into early 79, the chaos actually started to ease off a bit. The relentless knocking, the violent fits, the deep rasping voice of Bill, they didn't vanish, but they became less frequent. It was like the major storm had passed, but it was leaving that eerie stillness behind. The kind that makes you wonder if the thunder's done or if it's just taking a breath. Neighbours said things went quieter but not normal. The odd thud still echoed through the night. Doors creaked open on their own. Cold drafts moved through the rooms that should have been still. And the house wasn't shouting anymore. It was kind of whispering. And maybe that's kind of worse. I don't know, because once you've lived through something like that, silence could be the scariest sound in the world. So Janet tries to live a normal life. Janet, the 11-year-old who'd been at the centre of it all, eventually grew up and tried to move on. She went back to school, got a job, started a family of her own, doing her best to live quietly after years of being the girl everyone called the ghost kid from Enfield. But that's the thing about normality. Once the world's labelled you as the voice of a poltergeist, normal doesn't really come easy, to be honest. In later interviews, Janet said she was bullied at school. Kids mocked her voice, her story, called her the possessed one. Kids are awful, right? Kids are so mean, and you can definitely see that this would have been a topic, for sure. And there was also a period of time where she actually refused to talk about it altogether. But she also said on record that everything she experienced was real. She didn't want fame from it, she didn't want any movies, she just wanted it to stop. And when asked years later if she thought the haunting was genuine, she said, "It was real to us, every single bit of it," end quote. And that's not the tone of a storyteller cashing in my opinion. That's the tone of someone who still wakes up at night thinking they heard a knock. And surely her whole life she's got to be like, terrified what's coming around the corner. I don't know. But maybe just move on from this type of shit. So you might be wondering, well, why did it just randomly drop off? Like, what did they do different? Well, somewhere around late 1978, when the family were at the breaking point, they actually called in a local priest. And there's no confirmed name or parish, right? But accounts say he performed a blessing. A traditional one. He sprinkled holy water through each room, recited prayers, and asked that the presence find peace. It wasn't a full-blown exorcism, more of a spiritual calm the room down session. And if I was the ghost, I'd be furious. Like, you call this a service? Where's the organ music? Where's the full vestments? Where's the upside down crosses and the flying furniture whilst you're revoking me in the name of Jesus? Like, I'm Bill. I'm Ghost Bill. I'm not just a house sparrow. You gotta cast me out. I'd be mad. I would be mad. Maybe he was, mate. He sounds mad anyway. Talking like that through Janet. Like, I died downstairs. Like, yeah, you did. Now move on. But yeah, anyway, after that blessing, something did shift. The intensity dropped, as I mentioned, that voice quietened, and Janet stopped having those fits. So, was it divine intervention, or the entity simply running out of steam? Either way, the Hodgsons finally caught a breath. And when you've been living in fear for over a year, even a small moment of silence feels like salvation to them. So what happened to Peggy? Peggy, the mom, the heart of the household, actually stayed in that same house for years. Imagine living in the same rooms where your children were thrown from their beds. She stayed because she had to. The council refused to rehouse them. Not enough evidence of danger, as I mentioned. And let me tell you, this is the most British haunted outcome ever. Because the whole house could be levitated, and the council would still say, sorry, you're not on the priority list. You have to stick it out for about another 20 years. Let me tell you, that is the most British outcome. Trust me. Peggy actually eventually passed away in 2003 in her mid-60s, and she actually never stopped saying what happened was real. She never changed the story, and, maybe that consistency over decades tells us way more than any scientific test ever could. Margaret, the eldest daughter, who was 13 when the haunting began, she was quieter than Janet, less outspoken in interviews, but always backed her sister. She kept saying, "It happened. We didn't ask for it. We didn't fake it." Public details about her later life are scarce. She stepped out of the spotlight, living privately, perhaps the only way to truly move on from something that big. And the house itself, the lingering quiet. As I mentioned, by 1979 the house calmed down. But the calm didn't mean closure, because the Hodgsons always said the energy never fully left. They'd still feel those cold spots, sense movements in the corner of their eyes, hear faint knocking, and even after Peggy passed away, the house didn't return to normal then either, because the next tenant reportedly moved out after just 2 months, claiming the place didn't feel right. No explanation, no media to it, just gone. See, they're the smart ones. Because when a house comes with a documented police record about the paranormal, you wouldn't even need the ghost to tell me to leave. I'll be out of there. So what do we make of it? With all this evidence, the witnesses, the recordings, what do we actually believe happened inside that little council house in Enfield? Some say hoax, some say hysteria, but honestly, I'm calling it real. You can't chalk this one up to imagination. Not when the details line up the way that they do, right? Think about it. A police officer files a sworn statement saying she saw a chair fly across the floor. 2 separate investigators from Society of the Psychical Research record thousands of unexplained events, not dozens, thousands, and a child speaks in a voice that gives specific details about a man who actually died in that house. Information she couldn't possibly have known. That's not a coincidence, that's evidence. And when you look at the pattern, the age of the children, the timing, the stress of a fractured home, it fits something much older than Enfield. You see, across cultures, poltergeist phenomena often centre on children or young teens, especially girls. They're said to be more susceptible, more open to energy, more reactive to unseen forces, because kids haven't quite built up that mental armour adults have. They're emotional, raw, intuitive, and maybe that makes them easier channels or targets for whatever's out there on the other side. So maybe you could call it that Janet wasn't actually being possessed by Bill. Maybe she was a simple bridge, an amplifier for a spirit trying to be heard. And if that's true, then 284 Green Street wasn't just haunted, it was a message board between worlds. And that's why Enfield sits at the top of the paranormal charts, to be fair. It's the benchmark, the case everyone references, the one that refuses to fade. And sure, skeptics have tried to debunk it for decades, but every time they explain one piece away, 2 more fall out the shadows. Because even if 10% of the case was exaggeration, that means the other 90% still defies logic. And that's the maddening part. And you know, I respect the critics' effort, but at a certain point, you just gotta throw your hands up and say, alright, fine, the dead guy is really into rearranging furniture. The deeper you dig, the less sense it makes, and that's exactly what makes it so fascinating. And the thing that chills me a little bit is just how ordinary it all was. Like, it's not like this big, American haunting of, like, it takes place in a house that's been built on a 250-year-old graveyard, and, it seems just so normal. Your council estate house in your average housing estate, no castles, no cursed objects, no hidden graveyards, just a normal home, peeling wallpaper, mother doing her best, kids watching telly, bills on the table kind of thing, I don't know what's more terrifying, poltergeist speaking through your kid or the endless bills on the table in a council house. But somehow it became the stage for one of the most famous hauntings in human history, which means, like, if it can happen there, it can happen anywhere, right? So, if you ever hear a knock on the wall that seems to answer back, maybe don't ignore it. Maybe it's not pipes, maybe it's not wind, maybe it's something else, something older, something watching, something that just wants to say, hello, it's me. And if that thought keeps you up at night, you're welcome. So next time you hear a knock on the wall at night, maybe you blame the neighbours or the plumbing. Maybe, just maybe, give it a little nod and say, evening, Bill, and then leave the house immediately. Alright, so that's the story of the Enfield Poltergeist, one of the most famous, most documented hauntings in history, a case that's been dissected by skeptics, worshipped by believers, and haunted by questions that still haven't been answered to this day. But if you listened to last week's episode, you'll know I teased a little something towards the end of the episode, because whilst we spent the last however long diving into other people's paranormal experiences, tonight, it's my turn. Yeah! This week I promised I'd finally talk about my own experiences. And honestly, I have to say, I do come to this job to make this podcast with a healthy dose of skepticism. You have to, or you'd never sleep. And I've got to admit, I have been putting this off, not because I don't want to share it, but because even after all this time of covering conspiracies, hauntings, secret projects, and all that sort of weirdness, even after all these years since my experiences happened, it still kind of makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. So I think it's time to tell you exactly what happened to me, where it happened, when it happened, and why to this day I still don't have an explanation that makes any sense. And I'll be honest, like, literally just thinking about it is making me all bleh. But all I'll say is, if you are listening with the lights off, you might want to flick one back on. So, yeah, let's dive into it. So, my first encounter was actually when I was 7 years old. Right? 7 years old. For a solid year, I would wake up every single night, without fail, at 3 a.m, which I found out is the witching hour, and also the time where the clock stopped last week in the Perron house from last week's episode. But yeah, I found out loads of things happened during 3 a.m. apparently. And every single night, I would wake up 3 a.m. and this figure would be at the end of my bed, sitting there, just staring at me. Now, as a 7-year-old, I couldn't comprehend what was happening, but it was every night for about a year. Like, 3 a.m, wake up, figure at the end of the bed, sitting there looking at me. Like, really, like, dark shadow outline. It wasn't a person, it wasn't like my brothers, or it wasn't my mum or my dad. It was something I could see and kind of see through, and there would be kind of a light that would come through my window from the street lamp, where I could kind of like see my room. Like, it wasn't pitch black, you could kind of see this room, and it would just be like this figure that would just sit there, and it was literally at the end of my bed and would just stare at me. And the way that I kind of justified it to myself, or explained it to myself, was I just told myself it was my nan, and like, she died about 4 or 5 years before, and I was just so comfortable with this figure at the end of the bed. Like, it didn't give me any kind of malice vibes, or it was haunting me or trying to hurt me. It was just this kind of feeling of familiarity. So I just told myself, like, and I remember telling some of my friends at school, like, my nan comes and visits me at 3 a.m, and yeah, I guess I was the weird kid. Now I'm thinking about it. But yeah, I would just see this figure, and I kind of just got used to it. You just like 3 a.m, wake up, see the figure, go back to sleep. I guess I kind of looked forward to it. Like, oh yeah, I'll get to see my nan tonight, that kind of thing. So yeah, that was my first ever experience, and it wasn't a scary one at all, and had this kind of familiarity to it. So I think that was a really positive ghost, I guess, or a positive spirit, or maybe it was my nan, I don't know. But that was their first experience, 7 years old, and it lasted for about a year. Right, it was literally a year of waking up at 3 a.m. every night. And when I say every night, I mean every single night. But then, after about a year after it stopped, I actually had another experience, my second experience, which is when I was out with my dad at one of his Sunday League football matches. Right, I was in like the toilet block, you know, the kind back in the day, you know, built out of that cold grey breeze blocks, you know, smells of damp and disappointment. It was turned into a toilet. There was like 3 cubicles, 3 urinals, and a sink. That was pretty much it. That was all that was in there. And I was in a cubicle. I remember this so vividly, guys. I was in the cubicle, you know, just doing my business, and all of a sudden, all the other cubicle doors just started banging, like violently, like bang, 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 bang. It was like someone was like just kicking them in over and over again, one after the other, right down the line. I was in the middle cubicle, and the right and the left, the doors just bang, 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 bang. And I remember, like, the door was quite high, and the sides were quite high, so you could see underneath that there was nobody there. There was no shadows, there was no actual physical person in the room at all. It was literally just me. And I was like 8 and a half. I just remember being so scared, just like being in that cubicle, just like bang, 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 bang. So, to the point where, like, I unlocked my cubicle, legged it, I ran for my life out towards the bathroom door. And as I got to the bathroom door, I could see through the doorway into the hallway. As I got towards the bathroom door closed as well. and like trapped me inside a little bit. And I was like, what is going on? Anyway, I pulled the door and went straight out. It wasn't tough to pull the door or anything like that, but I was literally alone in that bathroom. Both cubicles, bang, 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 bang. Nobody else in there. And I assure you there was nobody else in there. I ran for the door. As I'm running for the door closes on me. And then I just reopen it and I leg it out. Like, that was crazy to me. I would just remember, I so vividly remember, I can remember the smell of being there. I can remember what it looks like. I could literally paint you a picture. Like, if you could get inside my head right now and have that fucking, I don't know what's it called, Neuralink or whatever, and it could paint the picture, you could see it so vividly. Yeah, and that was crazy. That was just like, that was the first time I'd experienced something of the supernatural where it kind of scared me, where I was like, oh, that wasn't nice. Like, the figure that used to sit at the end of my bed, I was like, this is nice. I don't feel any threat from that. But when I was in that bathroom, that was the first time I was like, whoa, this is violent. Like, this is scary. Yeah. So I legged it, went back to the football, and as all kids do, I just went back to play and moved on with my life. But the experiences don't stop there, because I'm going to tell you something now that I've never really spoken about with anyone outside of like my close circle, my close friends. But when I was younger, around 12 years old, I actually started to experience sleep paralysis. That's the scientific term, isn't it? Sleep paralysis. Yeah. And that really, really, I've had some awful experiences. Let me tell you. Some really nightmarish experience. And I'm only going to tell you about one of them today. I'm only going to tell you about the very first one that happened to me, because it is crazy. You will not believe what happened to me in my mind, right? You will not believe this. So, I was 12 years old, and let me tell you, this first experience, like, even just thinking about it now makes me like, yeah, very interesting, very terrifying. No idea what was going on. My first ever time experiencing it, so I honestly thought I was dying. So, what happened was, I was in my room, double bed, and in front of the double bed is the wardrobes at the end of the room. To the left is the TV stand with the TV on it. Right, 12 years old, so, mid-2000s, let's say. I was lying in my bed, just chilling, ready to, fall asleep. And I remember I was like lying on my back, and all of a sudden, the room started to kind of pulse, like really pulse, like in and out, like the wardrobes was coming closer to me and then going farther away. The ceiling was coming in on me and then going further away. Like, it was like breathing into me, right? And then all of a sudden, everything went pitch black, and all of these caution signs started coming at me, like red caution, like stop, go back, return, like red lights flashing, and everything became like red strobe lights, just literally like hitting me, and my eyes were wide open. I was like literally on my bed. As all these signs are flying past me, all of a sudden they stop, and I'm just in my room, and like I'm completely and utterly paralyzed from the head down. I cannot move. The only thing I can move around is my eyes. And so I'm lying there on my bed, paralyzed, looking upwards, and I can kind of scan the room, and I can see my wardrobe, I can see my TV stand, I can see my feet, I can see my body, and all of a sudden, these figures started to come out of like the void. They just started to appear into the room, and started with like 4 or 5 at the foot of my bed, and then more and more came, and then all of a sudden there was like a crowd of figures all just standing around me, like looking over me, and then my room started to fill with sand. Yeah, no word of a lie, started to fill with sand up to my body. So all of a sudden now I'm lying on sand, but it's really weird because I could still see my room as well. I can still see everything in my room, but then you can also see all of this happening within it. So it fills with sand, and then these figures, two of them come, one to the left, one to the right, and no word of a lie, I don't know how to explain this or what the interpretation of this might be, and I'm not doing this for listens or views or anything like that. This is a genuine memory. These two figures, they pull my arms out, one to the left, one to the right, right? And I look around, and all of a sudden, everybody's in like old, like drapes, like desert clothes. And the two people that have me, left arm, right arm, are soldiers, like old ancient soldiers, like Roman soldiers or something like that. And the left arm and the right arm, and they literally pull me so far apart that I'm in that kind of like Jesus on the cross position. I don't know what that's called, but like the where your left and your right arms are stretched out, and you know how Jesus was positioned on the cross. And they literally took the palm of my hand, right, with a nail. They took each palm of my hand with a nail and a hammer, and in both sides they hammered a nail straight through the middle of my palms, and I felt everything. It was like excruciating pain. Remember, I'm paralyzed. I can't move at all, only my eyes, and I'm seeing all of this going on. I have no idea what's happening. I'm 12 years old. I can't move. My room is full of people, full of sand. I can still see my wardrobes. It's all an absolute mind twist. They literally nail straight through my palms. Then someone places something painful onto my head, and it cuts into my head, kind of like thorns, and literally places it onto my head, and it really hurt because it was cutting into my head. And I'm in this kind of stretched out arm position. They all move back, and then all of a sudden, everybody in the room, the whole room is shaking. I cannot explain to you, uncontrollably shaking. And I came off my bed. I raised up from my bed into the middle of the room. Above my bed. I was in there in that stretched out position with this painful thorn on, painful middle of my palms, because I could feel absolutely every bit of pain that was associated with that being nailed through the palm. And I'm levitating in the middle of the room, and everything is moving like a magnitude 50 earthquake, literally just going crazy, crazy, crazy. And then all of a sudden, I'm in my head, I'm thinking that I'm dying. So I'm trying my hardest. I'm pulling all of my internal energy from inside me. And the only way I can explain this feeling is if you curl your fists up and you try and make your whole body shake, curl your fists up and that kind of feeling, and then do that as much as possible, and then just try and push forward with all of your energy coming out of your body. And I did that, built up so much of that energy internal, and pushed out of it, and I literally fell straight back down onto the bed, was out of the paralysis state, and I could literally see where I'd fallen on the bed. I hadn't just kind of woken up from a nightmare. I could see how my bed sheets had been manipulated by the fact that I'd fell on them. And that was the end of my first ever experience. And let me tell you, when I say that was absolutely terrifying, I can't explain how much sleep paralysis really is the most terrifying thing that could possibly happen. It literally is the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced, and I experienced it many times after that as well. But it honestly feels like you are dying. You see so many things that are not normal and you cannot explain. But that one in particular, I wanted to tell you about that first one because that was the very first introduction that I'd ever had into it, and it was wild. How was I put into that position? It was almost the only way I can describe it is I was reenacting the crucifixion of Jesus. Like, that is the only way I can explain it. And I don't want to sound like a kook. I don't want to sound crazy. Just my personal experience. That is exactly what I experienced as a 12-year-old and having sleep paralysis for the very first time. And let me tell you, the craziness, it doesn't kind of stop there. There is an added little thing on that happened after that. Because when morning came around and the light came into my room, I looked down 2 of my palms and I had red circles in my palms, like where the nails had gone through. There was literal like red marks, bruising. I had marks on my head where the thorns had gone in. Like, it was real. Like, it wasn't just like, oh yeah, you had a bad dream and then the next day you got over it. The next day I had physical harm on my body from that experience. Yeah. I don't know what else to say, but that was my first experience, and I had so many more experiences after that. I'm actually gonna try and write some type of memoir book thing about it, because I've had so many, and I remember them so vividly. That's the thing with sleep paralysis. You remember them so vividly. And always my sleep paralysis is when I'm going to sleep, not waking out of it. Because I've done a bunch of research, and the majority of people get it when they wake up from REM. They're in that kind of sleep stage and kind of conscious stage, and you get trapped in between. Mine is, I'm just lying there, and all of a sudden I feel this like pulsing rhythm, and the room starts to like come in, go out, come in, go out, come in, go out. So if anyone else experiences anything like that, please let me know. Send me an email, conspirashy@gmail.com. Send me a DM on TikTok, Instagram, @Conspirashy. Let me know. I would love to hear your experiences of this phenomena, because it's so close to me and what from my experiences of it. And I know how terrifying it is. And I know how it feels to maybe not want to talk about it because you don't want people to think you're crazy. So I'm definitely an ear for your experiences. Please reach out to me, tell me about them, because I'm all ears. I do believe you. I have experienced it, so definitely let me know about that. I'd love to have a chat with you about it, and hopefully provide you some peace of mind about it as well, because I've actually managed to tackle it, and I had it for years. I'm talking 12, 15 years, and I learned how to fight it. So if you do experience it and you'd like some advice even, or just to chat to someone, please reach out to me. I'm all ears. And that's my stories. Told you it was a bit mad, didn't I? Well, whether you believe in the paranormal or not, there's one thing I've learned from all this, and it's that something is happening out there. You could call it ghosts, energy, frequency, multiverse, whatever fits your vibe. But after everything we've heard in this episode, the Hodgsons, the voice of Bill, the police, the priests, the knocks, and my own experiences, it's safe to say, reality's probably got a few cracks in it. And honestly, I'm alright with it, because it's those cracks that keeps us curious, that make us question, that keeps us coming back to Conspirashy. But hey, if you're still listening, as I mentioned, if you've ever had something weird happen to you, I do want to hear it. Send it in. You can DM me or voice note me, Instagram @Conspirashy, send me a DM on TikTok @Conspirashy, or drop an email, conspirashy@gmail.com. I read everything. So the funny ones, the freaky ones, this sounds insane, but I swear it happened ones. It's literally what this show's built on. So, and if you have enjoyed this episode, or enjoyed any of the Conspirashy episodes, make sure you follow, rate, and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you're listening right now. It really helps the show reach more curious minds and keeps us digging into the next big mystery. Next week, we're exploring a major conspiracy. Not going to spoil it, but let's just say we're talking a trip somewhere dark, classified, and definitely not on Google Maps. So make sure you're following, because you don't want to miss an episode. And that is a wrap on today's episode. I'm Ash. This has been Conspirashy. I'll see you next Wednesday. And until next time, keep your tinfoil hats polished, keep questioning everything, and remember, the truth is out there.